It began with the forging of the Great Rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all.
One ring to rule them all, and one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, in the darkness bind them. There's only 2 lines of a verse long known in elven lore. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
Ashnazga dura batuluk, Ashnazga gimbatul, Ashnazga thrakatuluk, Ach burzumishik.
Hello guys, it's Lady B here, and welcome to our 7th and final installment of Silmarillion Book Club. I have our good friends and co-hosts Gadfly here and Feanor, and unfortunately we will not have Man of Manetheren Nathan with us because he has the flu, so we hope he gets better. And welcome, friends. Wow, I think this is our first book club of the new year, but I wanted to say hi. Thanks for watching, and if you're watching on the rerun, thank you for watching too. And yeah, how have you guys been?
Good. I've been
pretty good. Yeah,
been doing all right.
Yeah. Good. I hope you all had a great Christmas. I was trying to think of, okay, so I did like Father Christmas, and then I did the Tolkien Chill stream, and that was really fun. Probably going to do that again. But yeah, this is my second stream of the first stream of the new year. So Happy New Year, you guys. And yeah, so we are at the end of the Silmarillion, and man, this has been a trip. This book has been insane to read. There is so much to learn in this, and it's been an emotional roller coaster. I mean, some of these chapters are really hard to get through, but we're on the last one. And I got a new book, a new copy of the Silmarillion.
Yay!
I love it.
Not beat up.
I know, like the cover, I'm like the first 3 pages have fallen off of it now. I think I'm just gonna file it away and keep it forever because it's awesome. But let me go say hi to people in chat too. Your Barmy's first. Hi Barmy, if you're here again. John Thomas, I missed the last quick recap. Oh my gosh, there was so much to do. John, thanks for watching. We did the fall of Numenor and that whole story, and
Kabbaleth.
They call it, yeah, how do you say it? A Kabbaleth.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have Heisman. Hello, nice to see you. Logical Spot, good to see you too. And Jacob too. Thank you. I know. I know. New Year's was almost 4 weeks ago. I know, but I just wanted to say hi to everyone. And hello, Nerdporial. Hope you're doing well in your neck of the woods. And of course, we have Will enjoying the sports ball in the other room and watching us. And Rocky, the Black Dragon, nice to see you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Nerdporial. I've been showing him different genres of movies as of late. So we've been watching I don't know if you guys know the wuxia genre of Chinese films, the mystical Chinese films. He's never seen them before, so I've been showing him. We've been watching in our own little Discord. We've been watching those films, so it's been pretty awesome. Fun. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, all right, where should we start, guys?
At the very beginning.
Let's see when the rings were forged.
At the very beginning of the Third Age.
Third Age. Although really, well, no, technically it'd be the second age where we're starting.
Yeah,
Well,
this is
technically
that
at the very
was-
beginning of the Rings of Power, or the Rings of Power in the Third Age,
Yes.
we're not in any age.
It's true.
Yeah, it kind of it's interesting because you have the Akalbeth, and then it sort of like happens later in time than this story starts. So this kind of takes us back a bit, and it starts with when Sauron was Anatar. And oh yeah, so it tells the story of Sauron and what happened to him after the War of Wrath. And so basically Melkor gets defeated, and then Sauron goes to Yonwe, who is the Herald of Manwë, who is the dispenser of justice. And he wants to repent, but he's afraid of being judged, and he flees back to Middle-earth. Or, whoop.
Interruption here, because it says some hold that this was not at first falsely done. So that also implies that some believe that Sauron never was truly repentant.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's just kind of... I don't think he would have ever been repentant because...
Well, it says here that he was only repentant because he was beaten.
Right? Yeah.
If he was repentant, which makes all those people who talk about Sauron being a misunderstood thing nonsense. It's like we've talked about it extensively before, but in this chapter there are two implications. One, that Sauron never truly repented and was always evil and sadistic. The second one, that he was repenting because he was in fear of punishment and justice, which means he still was always an evil bugger.
Yeah.
Those are the only two options presented here.
And ultimately, if a character is repentant, they typically, more often than not, try not to repeat the evil deeds that they were repentant of. Whereas Sauron, he just automatically goes back into full-blown evil.
It's not even necessarily that people who are repentant don't want to recommit the evil that they did, but they want to make amends.
For it. Yeah, that's very, 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 very true. Yeah.
I mean, we could kind of take it back to the part where the last of Feanor's sons were like, they didn't want to keep looking for the ring, but they knew it was like kind of their destiny, and they knew what they were doing was wrong, but they like just didn't know how to get out of it, and they didn't think that they would give forgiveness. So that's an interesting comparison.
In the Discord, when I talked about some of the language deep dives, I really want to do a deep dive on the word doom, because that is a very low word. Doom and fate are two things that are very closely interconnected, but not in the way that people think. Because Tolkien was coming at it from a Germanic linguistic perspective, which completely changes things.
Yep.
So doom essentially just means a judgment, and fate isn't something that is in the future. Fate is something that's the here and now, that is unavoidable and unchangeable present. But like that's a huge topic that I can.
Yeah, which I'm hoping that we'll be able to meet up again, and you could do some more deep dives, because when our like group chat for kind of planning our show and stuff, we were talking about doing like side quests, like maybe kind of a show where we could just deep dive into linguistics or stuff like that. That was really interesting, that Gadfly knows so much about, and we're all like, okay, be our professor and tell us about it.
Well, here's the thing, Lady B, one thing I would recommend as a purchase, as a matter of fact, I might buy it for you, is The Nature of Middle-earth. It is the quintessential guide to like all of like the science, for lack of a better term, of Middle-earth. It goes into like Numenorian life cycles, Elvish life cycles, how different foods are made, all sorts of different things.
There's also this collection, The World of Tolkien by David Day.
I gotta remember like how to like how do I toggle this to like think? Oh, I think whoops.
No.
Sorry. I'm remember how to like show this out here.
Now I know the David Day collections are a bit. There is a segment of the fandom that frowns upon them.
Oh, here we go. Keep talking. You can show us your books.
I have them as well. I think they're nice.
Oh wow, that's beautiful. I love
does that include? Does yours include the bestiary?
This is the whole set. So
it's the whole set.
The dictionary.
Wow.
The atlas.
That is awesome.
The battles.
The battles. Wow.
Yep. And then
the heroes.
Heroes of Tolkien. And then
the dark powers.
Dark powers.
The dark powers. What do they mean by dark powers?
And finally, the hobbits.
Hobbits, yeah.
Oh, shoot! You do need to pick it up then. There is a my missus got it for me. It's the Bestiary by David Day. It has like an entire list of like all the creatures and everything from Middle Earth.
Oh wow. Oh whoa. Oh, you have these at home. Wow, we need to talk. Okay, like at your here or like at your parents' house, because we need that in our life, babe. Those look so pretty. I mean, some of these like really nice collections are just awesome.
The front cover, like the spine, right? Like it all comes together for an image, right?
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, it's cool.
Or something.
Yep.
That is way cool. Okay.
Yep. Guide to Tolkien's World, a bestiary. And it has like who's the art by? I always forget.
So I have a question. So John was wondering, is Halbrand ever a name used by Sauron in the Silmarillion?
No.
Well, it can't be a word because they didn't have anything licensed. So.
I don't want to excuse. You know what my response is to that? If you don't have the license to use the material that you need, you probably shouldn't make the show.
Yeah.
That's my honest opinion.
Well, the other thing about the name Halbrand is that linguistically it is entirely wrong.
Yeah.
For the world.
Yeah, it doesn't. I really hate that. I hate how there's. You know what? We're not talking about that. There's going to be plenty of times when we can talk about this abomination. That show is such a great metaphor for like the evil power of Sauron and Melkor. That even though they can get out of Middle Earth, like there's still seeds there, and it just infects things. Anyway,
it's so true.
Yeah, so we go back and we kind of hear what happened to Sauron, and he ends up like fleeing like punishment and stuff, and he goes back to Middle Earth. And then they start talking about some of the changes in Beleriand and how they go through the different cities established by the elves. We have Mithlond and Eregion, and that's close to Khazad-dûm. And they talk about how Celebrimbor becomes a skilled metal worker, and he says he was probably second only to Feanor, which is, of course, important later. And Sauron keeps doing his thing where he's turning men evil, and they talk about the kind of corruptibility of men and stuff like that. And he's going around basically trying to see if he can make friends with the like different groups of people that are in Middle Earth now. And some of the elves are wise to him. Like Gil-galad is like, get out, like, because he's like, he's like, I have knowledge you can use, and he's like, there's something up with this guy, and he does the same with Elrond, and Elrond's like, nope. And at this kind of time, he's known as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. So
but notice the way in which he seduces the elves against Elrond and Gil-galad, and how he talks about how because they don't accept him, they must be secreting away the secrets to their kingdom's prosperity and happiness, and therefore they have designs on the whole world, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very insidious type of reasoning and logic. He's like, hey, we're friends. They don't want to be friends with me. There must be something wrong with them.
Right.
As opposed to the wise elf would probably think, hang on, Gil-galad and Elrond, the two wisest of the elves have a problem with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should have a problem with this guy.
Right.
But it's just that twisting of logic and reasoning to harbor or invoke jealousy and envy towards another person.
Yeah, and it just shows Tolkien's like really mastery of sort of psychological like manipulation, because he's not, that's not the only thing he does. It's like he goes around like with it, like he's the gift giver. He brings all this knowledge and stuff like that, and he's all like, well, I could teach you all of these things, so why don't these guys want you to know this stuff? Like, ask yourself that kind of a thing. And
there's also an appeal to yeah, almost a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Sympathy in a way, saying, you know, I too want to make this world incredibly fair, just like you guys want to. You know, it's almost like a faux persecution complex in a way. Like, I'm being persecuted by Gil-galad and Elrond because they are not understanding that I come in with goodwill and good intentions, and I just want to do the thing that you guys want to do, and I want to help you, and they will not aid me in my labors, I believe is the exact quote.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a little bit of playing to the sympathies of the elves of Eregion there.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's the exact quote. Let's see here. Yeah, alas for the weakness of the great, for a mighty king is Gil-galad, wise in all lore is Master Elrond, and yet they will not aid me in my labors. Can it be they do not desire to see other lands become as blissful as their own? Yeah, so there's the jealousy aspect of it. And then this last bit where he says, I perceive that you love this Middle Earth as I do. Is it not then our task to labor together for its enrichment? You know.
Enrichment. Bro. I like how, like, at this point in time, at least they seem to be like wise to this guy. I mean, like, what happened to like Thingol and stuff when he had a lot of his pride got in the way of him meeting his end because of like the wanting the Silmaril in the necklace and stuff with the dwarves. So yeah.
And can we talk? Can we talk for a minute too? Damn, woke elves were responsible for that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go woke, get completely destroyed. Anyway,
broken.
But what I was gonna say is, can we talk for a moment just about how great of a villain Sauron is?
Yeah, like, he is.
I feel like, and I honest to God, I feel like, in some ways, not just the Abomination, but also the movies as well, they really don't do him justice at all. I
don't think they do.
Because
he's able to pull on every individual person and individual groups deepest things, right? Because he has to work differently with the dwarves than he does with the men. But he's still able to pry into the dwarven weakness for their desire for treasure and artifacts, and that's how he's able to exert control over them with the Seven Rings. Which I guess we haven't even really gotten onto the.
Yeah, I was just gonna pull that up because I think that was the biggest surprise in this chapter. Was like, oh, it's like the making of the rings. It's like just a little tiny bit. And I'm like, this is the biggest thing. This is what we reach. This is set up for everything.
Well, they spend some time on talking about the three, right?
It says, Narya, you know what's interesting too, going back to the whole jealousy and like how he picks everyone's weakness. It says, in this part, it was in a region that the councils of Sauron were most gladly received, for in that land the Noldor desired ever to increase the skill and subtlety of their works. Moreover, they were not at peace in their hearts, since they had refused to return into the West, and they desired both to stay in Middle Earth, which indeed they loved, and yet to enjoy the bliss of those that had departed. Therefore they hearkened to Sauron and learned of him many things, for his knowledge was great. In those days the smiths of Oft and Edhil surpassed all that they had contrived before, and they took thought, and they made the rings of power. But Sauron guided their labors, and he was aware of all that they did, for his desire was to set a bond upon the elves and bring them under his vigilance. So I'm like, oh, it's just, they made the rings. It's like, once it's like, sure.
Well, it's kind of interesting. What I was gonna bring up was I used to be in forums all the time, like death battle type forums where like they'd pit characters against each other, and I'd run into a lot of people who especially Harry Potter fans who would put Voldemort up there and be like, oh, what Dark Lord, blah 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 blah. I'd be like, no, Sauron would defeat Voldemort, and they'd be like, okay, how? And I'd be like, he'd talk to him. And they're like, what do you mean he'd talk to him? I'd be like, he'd just sit down and have a conversation with him, and by the end of the day, that'd be done. It'd be over. Discussion's over. It is done. You're under my control now. Like
Sauron would have guided Voldemort to becoming a Dark Lord.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like I feel like if you go like Wheel of Time, some of the like weaker of the Forsaken could totally turn, or like Sauron would. Yeah, he couldn't stand up to them. He would just totally turn them even more evil.
But that's the thing. Sauron is the best way to describe him as conquer a single school, right? Well, the thing is, but the way I would describe him is he's a sadistic puppet master. That's his strength. Whereas, he can be combative. Certainly he faced off against Luthien and Huon. He lost that one, but he can be that way, but his strength is in his guile, in his deception, and his way with words, shall we say.
Which I thought made that one paragraph just really interesting because it talks about the Noldor. It's like they could have left, but they didn't really want to, and it seems to be like they were, because looking at them as sort of like the more angelic beings in this world, they seem to be more into the earthly delights and the kind of temptations that would be in Middle Earth. And Sauron just
There's also a part of that too when it comes to the perspective of the Noldor. They had gone through all that BS with Morgoth and kinslayings and dealing with all sorts of tragedies, and it's like, well, we're still here. It's almost like a case of like, we're not ready to give this up just yet. I mean, we've already fought too damn hard and dealt with too damn much.
Well, it's also
leave.
Galadriel mentioned in the very beginning the reason why she went. She did not take the oath of Feanor.
No, she did not.
But she went because she harbored in her heart a desire to be a queen. So she had a desire in her heart to be a political, powerful leader, and that's still there. She ends up obviously becoming one and becoming the most powerful one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because she gets tempted. Like, there's definitely moments she could have like.
She has to learn a lot along the way.
That's kind of like.
That's normal for a person to have to learn their failings. Right?
So on to the rings. So I think one of the interesting things when I obviously I saw the movies, and before I read the book, I didn't get like all the different rings there were, and they kind of talk about more. And I have to tell you the story about how I learned more about the rings. And so Alex from White Cloaks is my boyfriend, and on our first date we went to a wedding together in Las Vegas, and we were walking through the Caesar's Palace Mall thing, and I was like, oh, look at this ring, it looks like that ring Galadriel has, so I'm gonna see if I can not boomer this and like show you my ring because I'm excited. So I was like, oh, look at it, looks like Galadriel's ring. So come on, focus.
Nice.
Yeah, so he got it to me, and it's kind of funny because it's 3 rings, so we're making jokes of it. But he's like, oh, it's what is a ring called? Because he knows a lot about this. He's very into it. And he's like, Nanya. And I'm like, kept forgetting the name. And I'm like, oh, I love this ring. It's so shiny and stuff. And he's like, well, remember, it's Nanya business. So, that's how I learned about the rings, and started, oh, there's more rings. And he told me about them and stuff. And then I read later Lord of the Rings. So we learned more about the Elven rings. And so, just to give you guys a sort of breakdown of the rings, there's Nanya it's made of adamant, and it's like the water ring. So I don't know if it's supposed to control anything. It doesn't really say. And then there's Narya, which was the fire ring. It had a ruby in it. And then there was Vilya, which had a sapphire, and it represented air. And so we learned later on that Galadriel has the Nenya. Círdan had Narya, and then Vilya was who had Vilya?
Elrond.
I think it was
Elrond.
Elrond. Yes, Elrond. Yep. So those were the keepers, and in addition to the three. And so what's interesting about these is that
it's also important to note that Círdan did not keep the ring.
No, he gave it to Gandalf.
Yes, I was just gonna say. So it says he gave it to somebody else. They don't mention who it is. And I'm like, oh, it's.
And it just so happens that the Maiar that he gave it to is also self-declarative, a servant of the secret fire, which just how things, interestingly enough, tie themselves together. That Gandalf would be the one to inherit, so to speak, the fire ring.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. It would have to be, because I was thinking about that, because in terms of power and stuff, like he's a Maiar, like Sauron's a Maiar, like they have to.
Well, Gandalf is also very interesting in that he learned from a lot of different of the Valar.
Yes.
As opposed to the other Maiar, who seem to like almost be a protege of one of them.
Of one, yeah, exactly. Right. Now, although it wasn't because Gandalf's original name, for those who, or not original name, but official name, was actually Olorin.
Yeah,
Olorin.
And
that's a lot of names.
Mithrandir, Olorin, the Great Pilgrim, so on and so on. Mithrandir, yes. And wasn't he, though, like officially, for lack of a better term, wasn't he a Maya of Manwë?
Yeah, well, Manwë kind of poached him off of.
Was it Elbereth?
No, the Weeping Lady.
Oh,
yeah. Let me see. I got my notes here.
Begins with an N.
Yeah, it's Nienna.
Nienna.
Yeah, Nienna. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he worked with her a lot, and from her he learned that greatest skill of compassion and understanding of the lowest, like not the lowest, but the less of all peoples, right? And then from there he worked with Manwë, the greatest, who worked with the greatest of them, right? So Gandalf had the education to learn to look for the lowest of peoples, i.e. the hobbits, and see the strength in them, as well as with the greatest of people, the heroes, the Aragorns of the world.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of Jesus energy there. But yeah, so that's interesting. So what was interesting about this is that they don't give you a lot of details about how these were made, other than Celebrimbor made the elven rings without Sauron.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they didn't get tainted by Sauron's grossness.
Well, they didn't get tainted by Sauron because they never used them while the One Ring was present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's how the One Ring works. Is you put it on, and then you can sense all the other rings and the thoughts of all the other people wearing the rings and stuff like that. So they never wore those rings while the One Ring was in place. Despite the fact that they had the power to halt the passage of time, so to speak.
Yeah, it's very vague. It says it like slows the passage ravages of time and stuff like that.
The three were still subject to the one, though, because of the ring lore, but because the ring lore that was used to create them was directly taught from Sauron.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I was going to ask you guys
if they had put them on during that time period, then they would have been the same as all the other rings.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and what was interesting about the elven rings in particular, and probably because the elves had some kind of telepathic powers, is that they put the rings on and they could immediately sense the One Ring and like, okay, this is evil, and they just took it off. So shows that they're like a higher level of being. And then that doesn't really tell about like the the making of the 7 that were given to dwarves and then 9. And
well, they were all made by the elves, and then Sauron demands them from the elves because the elves aren't using them because they sense the issue with them, right?
Yeah, there's a problem, and Liz like, no, give them to me.
And so he's
so
like,
how did they get? So how did they get
you use my knowledge to make them? Therefore, give them to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he makes a gift of them, right, to the mortal men, which are easy to sway.
Yes.
And then he also makes a gift of them to the dwarves, and uses the dwarves' desires for treasure and great artifacts to start affecting them.
Yeah, and that was really the only effect that they had on the dwarves, because Aule made the dwarves stout and not easily corrupted, but their greed could essentially be enhanced by the rings to where they could make some very foolish decisions.
Was it says their hearts were hard to read or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were that's interesting. It's I think it's fascinating to see how like Tolkien took like what the dwarves were. It's like because all of their stuff was sort of like, okay, when they got the rings, it was just they were into the like materialism kind of stuff. It was greed. It was like what they were like kind of into anyway.
So here we go. The dwarves indeed proved tough and hard to tame. They ill endured the domination of others, and thoughts of their hearts are hard to fathom, nor can they be turned to shadows. They used their rings only for the getting of wealth, but wrath and an overmastering greed of gold were kindled in their hearts, of which evil enough came after to the prophet of Sauron.
Yeah. Foreshadowing.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there that's foreshadowed. I think it talks about how all of the hordes were based. What?
Technically, the stuff, I guess, is retroactive shadowing as opposed to foreshadowing, but if you're reading Silmarillion, then the Lord of the Rings, then you get foreshadowing.
True that. So and I think so there's other important information that comes in here, like the dwarven rings each sort of formed the basis of the hordes. And then a lot of times there were dragons and stuff that ate the gold or whatever. I'm guessing. They said consumed, so I'm assuming it's like they literally just ate it. And then there's other important information. It was that the elves couldn't use the rings until the one ring was like not worn or it was lost. And I think it actually says it was lost. So there's some rules here that are set up, which is important.
So yeah, literally it wasn't until, and we'll get to it, but it wasn't until the defeat of Sauron at the hands of Elendil and Gil-galad that they were able to use their rings.
Yeah.
But even then, just to go forward a little bit to the Lord of the Rings, I believe it's Galadriel who said, deep down the elves knew that eventually everything they preserved with the rings would fade once the one ring was destroyed.
I know, that is really sad, and
Which
I used to think
so much.
I know, I was thinking it was so tragic when I was reading Lord of the Rings, and then I was kind of thinking, I'm like, I used to like T.S. Eliot's Guide to Practical Cats, which as a little kid, and it's obviously the basis pretty much verbatim for like the Cats the musical, so I was very familiar with that. And then I started thinking about that one time, and I'm like, okay, when they pick the one cat to go up to the Heaviside layer that gets reborn, I'm like, they're dead. So I was thinking about that, like the gray heavens, like, oh my god, they're leaving. I don't quite think they die in the sense of like, say, like, normal people, but it was it is kind of sad. But after reading the Silmarillion, I'm like, okay, guys, you're not like dying. You just go off on some different adventures.
Well, and here's not to really like jump off the rails here, but there's a common misconception that the Grey Havens and the elves leaving Middle Earth, that once a certain time had passed, all elves were gone from Middle Earth, and that's not the case. You still have the Avari, who don't live anywhere west of the Misty Mountains. They live predominantly in the east. Still a ton of woodland elves still around there. Not everybody, not
what
all
else?
not all the elves went to Valinor. That's not a thing that happened. It was predominantly the Noldor. The Noldor were finally like, okay, we need to go home.
Yeah, it's been
It's
3,000 years or whatever. Like we can.
Oh,
we can make
longer
peace.
than that. It's been.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
3 ages now.
The Age of Men still had dwarves and hobbits in it, right?
Yeah.
So
And like I said, elves.
Yeah.
The
elves.
Avari were still around. They were very. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess the way Tolkien always describes them is they lacked the civility. Not civility, but the they were much more
Like
barbarian-esque.
Yeah, they're kind of primitive, maybe.
They were very primitive in comparison to the Eldar, who built grand cities and underground cities and all this other sort of stuff, But
yeah, they were just down with nature, and I think because they were more of the natural world and they didn't have these great works, they didn't have so much to lose, so the loss of what they had built wasn't so haven't greatly felt because the natural world was still up there for them,
right?
And we know how much they like to vibe with the trees, so.
Interesting little because talking about, because we were kind of throwing around how long the elves had been there, how long the Noldor had been there. So I was reading Nature of Middle Earth, and it said that I believe it's for every year is 100. It's for every one elf year is every 100 years or something like that. I forget what the exact math is. I have it right here. But essentially it said that at the time of the exile of the Noldor, Galadriel in elf years was about 20 years old.
Wow.
So she would have been roughly 2,000 years old. And if we were talking as a standard measurement of time passing. So she's easily 8,000 to 10,000 years old by the time the Lord of the Rings happens.
Yeah.
She is truly ancient.
She's seen some shit. I know I found a book I was last my library down by my mom's house, and it had a bunch of token notes, and he would write on napkins. It's okay, this is why there aren't a bunch of elves, because this is so much goes into their reproduction and stuff like that, and it was crazy. I wish I could find the book again.
Oh, here it is. So it says 1 Valian year of aging equates to 144 years for mortal men.
And I guess they're not taking into consideration the kind of, it does mention, I think in the first or second age, where kind of time sped up because the world changed, and then I'm sure the whole transition from flat Earth to globe Earth, probably yeah.
It says later. It was every 25 to 36 Valian years equated to 100 years for mortal men.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
well, I think that's probably why there is, because there's one for their first 1,000 years and one for years following. Okay, that makes sense.
There's a ton of math here. It's full blown scientific breakdown of exactly
how let me get my little pin board and
literally. It's so cool.
That's another thing that could be a massive deep dive, because
no doubt
there's a lot of ancient astronomy, astrology, mathematics that you can go into in this stuff, where it's
exactly
there's the mix of the Egyptian method of dividing the sky into 10 compared to the Greco-Roman of dividing it into 8 and then 12. And mixing those two things together, and how the planets move in conjunction with that, and that effect on a year's cycle. There's a lot of stuff and once again, this is all stuff that the professor knew and was bringing into his.
Isn't it incredible? Again, not to go off track, but isn't it incredible? thinking that much into the world building, where it's like every single tiny minute detail has to be carefully thought of, and like it's so unbelievably impressive how
Absolutely.
much I just like I said, I have the book right here, and it just has generational schemes, and like the what was it, like, let's see here, blah, blah, blah. Comparing the aging, not the aging, but talking about where is it? Shoot, I can't find it. Population increases of the elves over the course of however many years. Like, it's like crazy stuff like that. It's amazing how, and then posthumously his son also. Credit where credit is due, Christopher as well. Like, just the amount of work and time consumption they did just to create this world is like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was really funny. The end part of the intro for today's show, I found from a huge collection of like public domain Tolkien clips, and he was talking in the last. He's doing the poem in the Black Speech of Mourner, and he's talking about how he composed this like in the bathtub, and I'm like, yeah. The bathtub. Wow. Okay. I feel like next time I take a bath, I'm gonna have to like start invoking the Black Speech, but hear the music.
The house starts shaking.
Yeah. The steam comes up. You will have a queen. It's terrible. Okay. So we have so much lore in like these 3 pages. It's insane. Right. So we've become the dwarves get undone, and we learn about some stuff that we find out more in The Hobbit, and then we find out that the 9 men, they become race that are tied to Sauron, and they're called the Nazgul, and they sort of fade into this invisible realm, and they live in the and they said that they live in the Shadow Realm. So this kind of I totally lost my train of thought on this, but I like the Nazguls. They're fun. What do you guys think about Nazgul?
I actually really like the parallel between the lives of the mortal men with the rings and the lives of the elves, because they both are deathless, but grow weary of life, right? So the elves, they live forever, but at some point they just tire of the physical existence, so to speak, right? And that's when a lot of the Noldor decide they're gonna sail across the sea. But because the souls of men aren't of the same nature as the souls of the elves, the souls of the men can't go anywhere, so they are stuck.
They're trapped
forever.
And it's sort of like the curse of immortality too.
Yeah, it gives another interesting aspect to Sauron's powers as well, because he's the only, to my knowledge, he is the only entity who can violate the creation of Eru, like the gift of men, which is death.
I don't think of that.
Because not only did he do it with the Ringwraiths, he also did it with Gollum.
Yeah.
The corruption of Gollum is a violation, which is the reason why Eru Ilúvatar stepped in at the crack of doom to nudge Gollum over the edge, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because he had no other choice.
Ultimate mercy to speak.
Exactly. But it's very interesting that Sauron had this. He's a very unique character in that he is the only character that can violate creation to that degree.
Mm-hmm.
To where
that's
you can
a great point.
You can actually affect whether something like dies or just lives on forever.
Well, it's one of the prime characteristics of Sauron and Saruman to an extent, and in the Lord of the Rings, they contrast with Tom Bombadil, where for them, their idea of their desire for knowledge is a desire for control over something. And so it's a desire for progress, but it doesn't matter what that progress is so long as they have it. Whereas Tom Bombadil is just pure knowledge. It's like science for the sake of progress versus science for the sake of knowledge and understanding.
That's a good distinction there.
And Sauron is definitely I want to know everything so that I have this power and control over it.
Now I have a quick question for you, Gadfly, because I can't remember off the top of my head. When Isildur, I'm getting to a point here. When Isildur cursed the men of Dunharrow, was that after the defeat of Sauron at the Dagorlad? Because his curse on them, he would have had the ring in his possession at that point because he took it as a weregild.
Oh, Isildur did, yeah.
Well, yeah, I wonder if I don't know if off the top of my head, because that would make sense if he curses them after the victory.
After he has the ring, which again, that is the dead men of Dunharrow are also a violation of, or the gift of men is being taken from them until they fulfill their oath to Isildur or one of Isildur's heirs. And if Isildur a part of that curse, I'd have to really dig deep into this to figure out if there's any validity to this. But if he had the ring while making that curse, then that could be the reason why the curse actually worked. If we really want to break down the science of it.
Good question. Yeah, how does Isildur have the power to curse? Yeah. Well, if he's Numenorian, would that give him some small bit of power?
The other thing to remember is the Silmarillion is a story about the power of oaths and curses.
Curses, yes, true.
Well, it's also oaths, right? Because it's the oath Feanor and his people make to take the Silmarillion on the name of Eru.
Yeah.
That holds so much sway and importance, right? So oaths and curses are powerful things.
True.
Which is, they still are. They just don't you make an oath
power
in this day
isn't quite as binding.
Yeah,
you should still keep it, right?
It's
if
just,
you don't,
it's just something that came to mind because I was just thinking about really the only 3 times we ever see the gift of men being taken from men is the Nazgul, Gollum, and the men of Dunharrow.
Yeah. But Sage does give a good point, though, that it's not necessarily that they've been completely taken, but it's that Sauron has corrupted and prevented it from its natural course.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Fair. That's fair. Mm-hmm.
But it's still something that nobody else has done, right?
Right. So. Exactly.
Yeah. So why don't we get back? Why don't we kind of? This is an interesting chapter to me because there is it's almost like a Wikipedia entry where it's just this happened and this happened and this happened. So after the rings are built and the Nazgul are starting to do their evil stuff, we get what's called the Days of Flight, and that's when a bunch of elves leave for Valinor because they're sensing a growing evil again. And there's orcs come out and the fell beasts multiply. I gotta say, fell beast is probably my favorite word from this series. And if our fell beast today comes out, that would be awesome. But I think he's with his dad. And
I do like the other name for it as well, the Hellhawks.
The Hellhawks, yeah. There's so many great fell beasts. I guess vampires, like giant wolves. Yeah, so what ends up happening is he's so powerful. He is challenged by the Numenorians, like we read in the Akalabeth, and that's when Sauron's like, okay, I can't beat them militarily, so I'm just gonna go over there and work my mind tricks on them, and we get the whole downfall of Numenor. And he dies. He loses his sphere form and ends up back in Mordor. And he's sort of like, I don't know what I'm trying to figure out if they meant that he is like he can't be like an attractive person anymore and could still take corporeal form, or he's just like a spirit. What do you guys think of this one?
He still takes corporeal form, but he's lost his ability to take the fair seductive, right. So that's essentially a punishment and a warning to Sauron from Eru. It's like,
he's like,
okay, maybe you should take and learn from this, right?
It makes it's a warning sign.
Right.
Like, if somebody looks like this and they're offering, if the guy in the creepy van is offering you candy, like, keep walking.
But it's also like a warning to Sauron, right? Like,
definitely.
Your powers are dwindled. Your ability to corrupt has now been taken away from you to that same.
And don't forget where your power came from too. So.
Yeah. So maybe you should think about truly repenting. But of course, that type of mind doesn't really think about that type of stuff.
So Elendil and Sons end up in Middle Earth after the giant tidal wave thing, and he hangs out with Gil-galad for a while, and then he goes on to establish a realm in Eriador around the River Lune and Barad-dûn, and the chief city is Enumenis. And then Isildur and his brother Anirion travel up the Anduin and establish Gondor and Arnor. And it just reads like a list, so I had to take notes on this. So I'm sorry that I'm reading this, guys. But the chief city in the south is Osgiliath, we remember from Lord of the Rings.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they built Minas Ithil, and that was Isildur's tower and sort of stronghold, and Minas Arnor, which was Anirion's stronghold. And they also built Isengard, and the tower Orthanc. Am I saying this right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, Llama. Thanks for coming. So, then they talk about, like, hey, Copa. Good to see you. Yeah, lots of world building in this chapter just for you. But so they talk about the tree that Isildur saved. So we have a new tree now, and they also talk about another very important thing for Lord of the Rings. They talk about the Seeing Stones, which are called the Palantiri, and they mention that there was one in every tower, and the closer they were to each other, the more they could see. And as they mentioned, there was also one in Osgiliath, so that's important for later. So, gosh, goodness, yeah.
Of 23 Seeing Stones, there were only 8 that were given to the Númenóreans. 8 or 9.
Oh, 7. There were 7. I wrote the numbers down.
Were there 7? So you got the numbers? Okay, cool.
Yeah, 3 went to Elendil, and then his sons got 2 each. And they can see things near, or if near the other stones, and if they had enough power, like themselves, they could see things elsewhere. So.
Yeah, because I had. Let me find it here. Yeah, I had the whole diagram.
Yeah, they were given to Amandil, the father of Elendil, from the elves for their faithfulness during the hard times in Númenor. So.
Yep. Because there were originally 9 that were given to the Númenóreans. Yeah, 7 of those were brought over, but there were a total of 28 Seeing Stones.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
If you remember the reason why the Seeing Stones were so special to the elf friends was during that time period where Númenor banned the elves from coming to the island.
Yeah, from going there.
The Seeing Stones were essentially a way for the elf friends and the elves to still share that communion with each other.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oops.
Is if you let a world. Hold on, what? Silmarillion.
Oh no, sorry, I just hit that. Copa has a thing against world building, and he doesn't like doing the legwork. He just wants his stories, but we joke about it a lot.
It can't have a story without world building. I'm sorry. I
know.
In Copa, I am happy to debate anytime, anywhere about this.
It's okay. He's just, it's his like pet peeve. He actually is a pretty good writer too, so I'm not gonna knock on anyone hating any one part of thing. But anyway, yeah. So oh goodness. Okay, so we get the story of what happened, and they talk of did we talk about Gondor and stuff like that, and all right, so Sauron returns back to Mordor. He starts preparing for war, and he eventually takes Minas Ithil and destroys the White Tree, and Isildur escapes with a sapling and flees with his wife and son. And then we get the next big war, and this is Gil-galad, Elendil, and the band from Numenor like reuniting, and they're going to go after Sauron, and they hold Mordor in siege for 7 years. And Anarion, Elendil, and Gil-galad actually die in this. And I wanted to. I've done a lot of really cool intros to my things where I show artwork and stuff, but I decided to use this because it actually looks good from the movie. But we get our like 3-second clip of Gil-galad in that, and I was arguing with Phil. I was like, "That's not Gil-galad." I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And Gil-galad's such a badass. I wish there were more of him.
Well, something very interesting about this battle, and a name that is not mentioned, is hold on. What's this world building? I can draw maps too. Oh, stop! So ignorant as hell. Okay, no, we're gonna have a conversation about this later. What I was gonna say is a name that isn't mentioned, but it's a person who died. Very important person is Oropher, who is the father of Thranduil of Mirkwood. The Mirkwood elves were at this battle as well, the Siege of Barad-dûr.
Well, there were creatures of all types on all sides involved in this battle, but it does make it's very clear that there weren't a huge amount of dwarves involved, but dwarves were involved on both sides.
They were there on both sides. That's interesting how it's both sides.
The only group of entities in which that were not on the side of Sauron at all were elves.
Were the elves, yeah.
However, you can say that some the orcs twisted elves. So there we go.
Yeah, exactly. But the Dead Marshes, where Frodo and Sam see all the dead bodies in the swamp, so to speak. That was, if I recall correctly, the majority of those were the Mirkwood elves, because of an ill-advised charge that Gil-galad was completely against. They just decided, screw it, we're just going to charge, and they ended up getting just slaughtered.
I was going to ask
the Light Brigade, anybody?
Right. And when you see the Dead Marshes, it's actually, the majority of it is Thranduil's kin, because they were idiots, and they decided to attack rather prematurely.
Ours is not to question. Ours is not to reason why. Ours is but to do and die.
Yep. And
I think that's how it goes. Charge of the Light Brigade.
Yep. And as Treebeard is known to say, the hasty stroke oft goes astray. And that's just another name to chalk up on the list. Yeah, because it's
so many like allusions to other things. It's crazy.
Yep, and like you said, Gil-galad, Elendil, Anarion, and those were the big ones. Other big ones of people who died, and obviously Sauron died, quote unquote. So
and then we get like the big battle, and that's where Elendil goes to fight Sauron, and he confronts him, and Sauron steps on his sword, and now his sword is very important. We've all seen Lord of the Rings. We all read Lord of the Rings. It's it gets broken, and then Isildur grabs the hilt, and with the hilt of the sword that he cuts the ring off his finger, and that's when we get back to Isildur deciding, you know what,
It's also important to mention that Elendil. In Sauron defeating Elendil struck a blow against Sauron that allowed Isildur to
cut the ring,
from Sauron's hand.
Yeah, because really it was Gil-galad and Elendil who took Sauron down. It was not Isildur. And we can get more into this, but Isildur doesn't take the ring out of temptation. That's another kind of misconception caused by the movies.
Yeah.
He doesn't take the ring because he was tempted by it. He takes it as a weregild for his father's death.
What is the weregild? I meant to look that up before.
Weregild means mangold, so it's the
payment,
monetary value of a man's life. It's Germanic legal codes. So the typical thing was the weregild of a man was 100 denarii, if you want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had all these different equations. So if you were an older man, then your weregild may be slightly lower. But if you blinded a person, that you had to pay half the weregild. If you killed a pregnant woman, you had to pay 3 times the weregild, and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. But weregild just means were means man, gild means gold.
Gold,
so the man gold.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, the ring was literally the payment in gold for the death of Elendil. Because eventually, well, we can get into that later. But that's something I like to clear up with a lot of people, is that Isildur wasn't
he didn't take it. Yeah,
he didn't take it out of greed, or a desire for the ring. He took it because of his father dying, which I believe Elrond still did protest that, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, he did. He wanted to get. It's like at the same time, it's like nobody knew. Like he wanted it. He wanted to get it from Isildur. But at the same time, they're like, I don't think there's anyone alive that can handle the temptation of the ring. So there was some debate about what they should do with it. So they weren't really sure. But he's like, oh, I'm keeping it.
But he at the outset wanted the ring destroyed because one, he knew the nature of Sauron, and that defeating Sauron or his corporeal form was not defeating Sauron forever. And so the powers that the One Ring had meant that inevitably, if it was in existence, the power of Sauron would rise again. And so it was like, we either destroy this now or we have a problem in the future.
Right.
Which he correctly points out.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting here that this is where it says that the Third Age begins.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, shoot, like, okay, so where does the Second Age start?
The Second Age starts at the.
Take care, Jacob. Thanks for watching. Sorry.
After the War of Wrath and the sinking of Beleriand, that's the beginning of the Second Age.
Oh, okay.
So after Morgoth is imprisoned behind the Doors of Night, that's pretty much in the Rising, or when the Valar raise up the island of Númenor. That's pretty much that time frame there. That's the beginning of the Second Age.
Yeah, the Second Age encompasses essentially the time of the Númenorians and the elves in ascendancy.
Yeah. That's interesting how he divides that up, because we were talking about, okay, where do in the Wheel of Time, like where do the ages start? And it usually is something like it's very similar to that, where they try to do that. So
it's typical with Tolkien's work. It's very clear, like the New Age is marked by some kind of cataclysmic event, like major event happening. In the books,
like no more flat Earth,
right?
Like
in the books, doesn't Aragorn wrest control of the Palantir from Sauron because he was Isildur's heir? Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Yes, he does take control of the Palantir.
He has magical powers.
That's the thing with Denethor as well. Denethor is of the same blood of the Númenorians, so he's.
Oh, that's a good point.
Denethor is not being corrupted by Sauron.
No.
Through Denethor is fully capable of using the Palantir without the full consequences of Sauron's direct corruption and control.
Yes.
What he is manipulated by is
it's like a personal
the visions
failure
and stuff
right?
that the Palantirs show him.
Yeah. Well, the way it's described is Sauron could not trick. It says something to the effect of Sauron could not trick Denethor into seeing something that wasn't there or something that wasn't real, but he could choose what real things to show him. To kind of bring him in despair.
Amplified the tragedies within Denethor's life.
Yes, and people forget Denethor was up until Faramir was hurt. He was actually very competent and very stout, very very strong-willed. He was not at all like it's probably my biggest gripe with the movies is how they portrayed Denethor. If I'm going to go with character depictions, issues with
that's one of them.
It's top on the list for me. But that's just more of a superficial opinion.
I've got some issues with Aragorn as well, but
I do too, surprisingly. But that's okay. I don't want to get too much in the weeds of this because
yeah.
That's
I don't know if I'm gonna last for like more than 2 hours today. Hopefully I do, but I've been in a lot of pain. But yeah, so we're getting into the really part where if you've read Lord of the Rings, you're like, yeah. I was definitely like, oh, I know this. I know this.
All the major points, yeah.
Yeah, so we have basically we just go through the story.
Just like illuminating the background events that are happening to the Lord of the Rings. So you're like, oh wow, I see all the depth and stuff that's going on behind the scenes, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have so Isildur refuses to give the ring to Elrond and Círdan when they ask, and he leaves with a bunch of his retainers. I think some of his family members with him, and because he's kind of arrogant, thinking, oh, we just conquered everything, like there's nothing to be afraid of. And they start heading to, I think, the north or something, and they're eventually attacked by a band of orcs, and as we all know, like Isildur gets shot and he ends up falling in the river. And
the orcs are able to track him by smell.
Oh, yes. That was one thing that was important in that part, the smelling. And then the other thing that was important is it wasn't that he lost the ring. The ring decided to leave him. I think that's how it was described. There's some interesting language.
Got vengeance for the death of its master.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That was some, let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Let me see if it says that, but okay, I'm not gonna find it. Like, I'm just sorry, guys. I am not at my top form today, but it was interesting because it says like it was a kind of conscious choice that the ring made. Like the ring has some kind of power to sort of make its own way in the world. So yes, Seth, I absolutely agree that Lord of the Rings is so much better when you know all the preceding lore. I'm definitely looking forward to reading Lord of the Rings again, and yeah, that's going to be fun. There's like a long reading list, and then there's the longer rereading list, and yeah.
I've got it here.
Oh, thanks, Gadfly.
But Isildur was overwhelmed by a host of orcs that lay in wait in the Misty Mountains, and they descended upon him at unawares in his camp between the Greenwood and the great river, nigh to Low Ningloron, the Gladden fields. For he was heedless and set no guard, deeming all his foes were overthrown. There well nigh all his people were slain, and among them were his 3 elder sons, Elendur, Aratan, and Cirion. But his wife and his youngest son, Valendil, he had left in Imladris when he went to the war. Isildur himself escaped by means of the ring, for when he wore it he was invisible to all eyes. But the orcs hunted him by scent and slot until he came to the river and plunged in. There the ring betrayed him and avenged its maker, for it slipped from his finger as he swam, and it was lost in the water.
I love that. I loved it. It avenged his master, betrayed him. Like, I like that. I like it because it sets up for what happens in Lord of the Rings, like with, and this made me so mad. This is totally off topic, but I was reading this book, that like one of the people from the church that I go to, Robert Bishop, wrote it, and it was about like the Eucharist, and they were talking about, he just brings up Frodo, like Frodo's the Jesus character, and Frodo succeeded, and I'm like, no, he didn't. Yeah. But and then he said that Tolkien was writing allegorically, and then I'm like, okay, I need to take a break from this book. But yeah, it's like it sets it up for that moment when you see that the ring, it's I don't want to say consciousness, but it has power of its own, and that it's
It also explains entirely how Bilbo got the ring in The Hobbit.
Oh, exactly. Right? Yeah, that's obviously the biggest part in this is like, how did it get in the thing? And yeah, so okay, so we find the orc, and like also when they talk about the room, they tell about what happens to Narsil, which was the blade that had belonged to Isildur's father, and the shards of it were kept, and there was a prophecy involved with that, and it can only be reforged when the One Ring is found again and Sauron returns, and they take it back to Imladris. And man, it was so hard for me to, well, luckily I had read this before I started feeling bad because I couldn't remember all the names, because this is Imladris is Rivendell. So yeah. I love it. I love it because it's realistic, but I also hate it because I get so confused. But we find out what happens to Narsil, and man, there's just so much in this part. Do you have any feelings, any more like things you want to say about this part, Feanor?
No, I'm just going through, and obviously we're going to be getting into the fate of the Dunedain in Gondor, and
oh yes, the Dunedain. Okay, so let me give a quick summary.
Like a gold digger who lost his job. Rip. Wow. Okay, that's.
Now I'm gonna get that song stuck in my head.
Oh man.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, so we find out that the sort of after the death of Isildur, the people of Gondor kind of, or the Numenorians in their massive kingdom that they had sort of break up, and they become what they call the Dunedain. Did they give a meaning for that word? Did it have like a?
It's the men of Westerness, if I recall correctly.
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought I know they did. I just didn't write it down. And Gondor grows in power, and then it wanes, and then Sauron grows stronger, and then we lose some more real estate to Sauron. We lose Minas Ithil is taken by the Nazgul and becomes Minas Morgul, which is some of the greatest parts in Lord of the Rings happen, where Sam was the man. Okay. And then Minas Arnor becomes Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, as Gondor keeps watch. And this is where we get the establishment of Gondor as the sort of vigilant kingdom, and then the rest of the kingdoms are not as much because they're sort of lessened in power and like kind of maybe forgetting these. Oh, I like that. Hey, Edmund, nice to see you. Possible unpopular opinion. Fell Beast is a description that could be applied to many things in Middle-earth, not the official name of Nazgul's winged steed. I didn't actually know that was, like, people thought it was the official name. I just liked it as a term because he uses it a lot to kind of talk about anything weird, like orcs, like the spiders, the, like, werewolves, like all of that weird stuff. And, I have a very large cat. Yeah, and sometimes he likes to jump on my stuff, so he's a little bit of a fell beast. So I just love that word. But what do you have? Oh, okay. Non-Con and Kargan that popularized it. I don't know if they actually use that. I know that it's just a term that Tolkien uses a lot in the Silmarillion, and that's why I sort of latched onto it. But
it is a term that he specifically uses to address them, but he also gives them the additional name of the Hellhawks. So
yeah, because I remember I believe it was in the story of Beren and Luthien when they talk about when Sauron took Tol Sirion. I believe it says, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure it says that he filled it with werewolves and fell beasts and all manner of evil creatures, essentially.
Yeah. But it's a good term.
Something interesting to note here is, so Gondor establishes Minas Anor as Minas Tirith after the fall of Minas Ithil. The thing about all of this, as Gondor as the staunch protector of the West, so to speak, from Sauron, is that's kind of what Sauron wants them to think of themselves.
Interesting.
What we come to find out, so I believe it's you find out in Lord of the Rings, but Boromir, prior to going to Imladris for the Council of Elrond, if I recall correctly, it is canonical that he helped take back Osgiliath.
Yeah.
Helped win back Osgiliath. But that was all a feint. Gondor could have easily lost Osgiliath, but Sauron wanted to make them think that they were in a position of strength when they really weren't. And that actually had been going on for a very, very long time, ever since the fall of Minas Ithil.
Well, it's a repeated strategy of Sauron's to allow his opponent to have a victory over him. But the victory or his defeat is his feint, and it's actually in the next passage or next chunk in here when it's talking about the Greenwood becoming the Mirkwood and the evil that's in there.
Yeah.
The way Sauron's strategy, it kind of reminds me of in another story. Actually, reminds me of a line of dialogue from a movie. Oddly enough, I'm sure you guys have seen the movie Gladiator. There's a scene in that movie where they're talking about our main antagonist is getting advice from one of his advisors, and the advisor is telling him about a fish that lives out in the sea that lets other little fish take little bites out of him, as kind of like a ruse into thinking that, that they're safe and secure, and then ultimately that fish eats the little fish. Sauron's kind of like that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he is.
But it wasn't until we were at
you know what else happens in here at this part that I really like? That we learn about Rohan and the Rohirrim, and they move out to Rohan and they come to Gondor's aid. I'm like, yay, Rohirrim! That's I'm a big fan of the Battle of Pelennor Field.
Well, the Rohirrim, they have a long-standing kind of kinship with Gondor. It was Eorl the Young and Isildur, right? Who were I might have my characters mixed up. Or was it Helm? No, it was Eorl. I'm pretty Eorl. I can never pronounce his name quite correctly, but Eorl, if you guys are wondering. But he was the one who brokered an agreement with Isildur for the land which became Rohan. And I believe Helm's Deep was also a gift from Gondor to the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
The fortress of for their own protection. But yeah, no, the Rohirrim are great. They're probably, as from a culture perspective, they're
so badass.
They're so cool.
They are the most Anglo-Saxon.
Well, that was the idea, right? Is that Tolkien believed that if Harold had a cavalry at the Battle of Hastings, that the Saxons would have beat William the Conqueror. And so that's where the entire idea of the Rohirrim came from.
Going on a complete aside, Harold Godwinson was beating the Normans because their cavalry was unable to break the infantry shield formations of the Anglo-Saxons. But Harold got an arrow in the eye, and so they lost their leadership. But the other thing to remember from that is the cavalry aspect was vitally important, because they had Harold mustered his forces, marched to the north of England to Stamford Bridge to beat the Danes, and then marched immediately back down, and halfway down released half of his forces, and then fought William the Bastard there. So if they had a large contingent of cavalry force, that whole trip would not have been as demanding as well. So
that's fascinating. Right. Wow, those small things could change history so much.
Right.
Yeah. So so after the Rohirrim, we learn about the Rohirrim. We learn of Elrond. He ends up keeping the heirs of Isildur in his care. And then the Elven rings are with, and they tell us about how they're with Galadriel and with Elrond, and they don't say who the third one is, but we learn later at the end of the chapter it's with Gandalf. And then we start talking about something really interesting here. The Istari appear in Middle Earth in the West, and men call them wizards, and they're sent from Valinor to help with Sauron. So we learn about three. Current. Help me with Sauron's name, please, Gadfly.
Curanir, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking I'm so bad at this, and I'm not. Okay, Curanir, and also known as Sauron. Mm-hmm. He came first. He was a smith, and that he lived in Orthanc. And then there was Mithrandir, who's also Gandalf, as we know, and he was known as an elf friend. And then there was Radagast, who was a friend to animals. And I like Radagast because I like animals, but so we learn about them, and we find out that, like, Gandalf is the one that's learned everything, and he's the one that walks among men a lot. And I think they mention him in the first chapter too of the Silmarillion. They talk about I was like, it was really funny. They talk about the Maiar, I think. Just like, I know I made notes. I took notes differently when I first started doing this, but I think there's definitely like some kind of allusion to him at the end of the first chapter, I think, of that. But so we have Gandalf. Well, of course, we love Gandalf, and then Radagast. They don't really talk about much, and he comes back in The Hobbit, right?
Radagast?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna
look well, because I know he
definitely comes back in the Hobbit films, and
yes.
Does he come
angered
back?
me to
Okay, so he is in there because I haven't read The Hobbit yet, so I've only seen those god-awful movies.
Radagast is somebody who's always sort of kind of in the background.
Yeah.
He's never really presented as a character too much.
It was he who, if I recall correctly, in The Lord of the Rings, it was Radagast who informed Gandalf that the Nine crossed the Isen.
Okay.
And he was also the one who bade the eagles to assist Gandalf in getting him to Rohan, so that he could get transport to ride back to Imladris.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, Gadfly, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this.
Because as we learn, well, significantly later in this chapter.
Oh yeah, I just found it. I'm so excited. Okay, so this part is in the Valakanta, and it's at the end, the section of the Maiar, and it says, "Of Melian much is told in the Kentis Silmarillion, but of Olarin, that tale does not speak, for though he loved the elves, he walked among them unseen, or in form as one of them, and they did not know whence came the fair visions or the promptings of wisdom that he put into their hearts. In later days he was the friend of all the children of the Luvatar, and took pity on their sorrows, and those who listened to him awoke from despair and put away the imaginations of darkness." So we get the elf lover thing. So I was like, I've read that, and I'm like, that's Gandalf, and now we have another clue from this chapter at the end. So was there any other wizards? I guess they said that there were other wizards, but they didn't really involve themselves in the
there were the two blues who traveled to the east,
Alatar and Palando.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's cool. That's one of those things that you don't know exactly what they're doing out there, but there's a lot of hints and clues as to their impact in that part of the world.
Interesting. Where does that come out? Is that like in Lord of the Rings, or
mostly in annotations and extra little things? But like it, because most of the people to the east and to the south fell under the sway of Sauron, but not everybody did. And so while the War of the Ring was happening, there were constant rebellions and uprisings against Sauron's control out in the east.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is, well, the Blues were out that way, so
they're trying to do what they could over there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then we learned about the Istari, and then we also learned that, things have been going really badly in Mirkwood. There's a darkness there. There's fell beasts. There's orcs in trouble. And so the Istari get together with some of the elves and form the Council of the Wise. And that is Elrond, Galadriel, Círdan, and some other Eldar. Saruman becomes the chief, as he had studied Sauron the most, which studying Sauron is kind of edgy, but we'll give it to him. And then Gandalf.
The other thing to note here is that Galadriel pushed for Mithrandir to be the head of the council.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mithrandir turned it down because he didn't want to be tied down to any obligations save to that of his lord. And what we know of Gandalf, Olorin, not being subject to one Valar, he's thinking of the will of Eru specifically.
Yeah, he's like, I serve Iluvatar alone, kind of. That's good for him. I think that says a lot about Gandalf and stuff, because there's definitely some, it's a thing that I think this part where it's like, you can study something too much. It's like, it's like when people say, like, don't become the thing that you're trying to destroy or something like that, or don't become evil and trying to get rid of evil. It's the kind of thing that happens to Saruman, because he studies Sauron so much that he
sees a kindred spirit in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
In Sauron, and it's like,
it's like, I know this. And I think there's some perception of weakness on Sauron's part, or at least belief in Saruman's mind that he could take him on. And that kind of leads him to tell the council, like, hey, the One Ring is lost. Nobody knows where it's at. Like, we should just do nothing and see what happens.
One of the things that's really interesting in this chunk, when you look at it and compare it to the council in Rivendell, Saruman says here, oh, the ring is lost. It's gone out to sea forever to be lost. In the council of Rivendell, Gandalf specifically says it doesn't matter where the ring is. It could be thrown into the deepest crack in the earth or into the deepest parts of the ocean. It will find a way back.
It has a mind of its own.
So just the fact that Saruman says here, the ring is gone, flushed away to the deepest parts of the ocean, and later Gandalf is like, it doesn't matter if it's flushed into the deepest parts of the ocean, it is coming back.
Right.
So that's just one of those neat little things.
Yeah. That is interesting. And it's so interesting because it's like the corruption is there, the theme of like you really, even for someone who is like, you don't know this when you're reading Lord of the Rings, but for someone who is of the same kind of like level of celestial being as like Sauron is, he can't even like resist this thing. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Saruman and Sauron were both serving Aule.
And Aule is one of the other Valar, aside from Morgoth, who contravened Iluvatar's will when Aule created the dwarves.
The dwarves,
so you now have both of Aule's disciples all following the path of going against Iluvatar's will. But they don't have the sense or the understanding of what they did wrong. and they don't have the desire to seek repentance, right?
Hey, Teresa. And we have like Alaska Jeff too. Thanks for coming by, guys. Yeah, that is true. And then it's like, remember when Ali says it's like he wasn't trying to usurp like Iluvatar. He was trying to like. I loved what he said. It was so true because it really felt like it reminded me of like
he loved Eru's creation so much that he wanted to fast track things.
Yes,
And then you note that he takes up the hammer to smash his creations of the dwarves.
And he's like, I'll get rid of it if you tell me to. And he's like, okay.
Well, he's going to, right? He's going to. And he's just like, I'm going to smash this. And it's Eru who stops him and says, look in their eyes. And he sees for the first time that within the eyes of the dwarves, they have their self-awareness and self-consciousness, as opposed to just being agents of Auli's will, right?
Absolutely. And thank you, Border Prince. That's the quote I was looking for, like a child emulating its father.
The dwarves were cowering in fear from his hammer.
Thank you.
And that's how he knew, like, because if they were like completely soulless, just puppets essentially, then they would have just stood there and been destroyed. But
exactly. But they saw him there, and that's what's different from them, because the intention behind what like Sauron does and did and what Saruman does and did is completely selfish here versus and they lie about what they're doing too. So I think that's different versus what Ali did, which was like saying, hey, I just wanted to be like you. So I like that part.
He also had he had the urge to share his knowledge with others.
So then we learn, okay, so Saruman definitely covets the One Ring for himself, and he starts looking for it, and he, he's taken up an Isengard, and he starts fortifying it, and then it says, you know what, he needs some spies, so he uses Radagast's birds, and they don't think anything of it because they're like, hey, we're trying to catch Sauron, so we'll just do it.
Poor unwitting Radagast.
Poor unwitting Radagast, but I would probably
he makes up for it.
I mean, we get like, isn't it like because there's still birds and creatures going up there, right? That's how Gandalf actually leaves, right? Because he whispers to and the eagles come for him. So I guess it's not terribly bad, but it's definitely the twisting of evil.
Once again, it shows the similarities between Sauron and Saruman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I gotta say, as like a writer, and I know there's different. I know the kind of background, I guess, for the naming conventions, but man, I was like, Saruman, like it's so similar. It can be kind of confusing, but luckily now I know it enough to know what's up. But so the council gathers, and they drive Sauron out of Dol Guldur and Mirkwood, and he returns back to Mordor, and then Saruman starts isolating himself. So after this happens, he's like, hey, I'm just gonna hang out, because I think he sees his chance to sort of like get a toehold into power and stuff. And then we all remember what happens in Isengard, so and then it talks about what happens in Lord of the Rings, and it's so weird to me because I thought, there'd be more, but like it just goes, okay, and now we're on to Lord of the Rings, and we find out the One Ring is found by halflings and ends up west of Eriador, and Sauron finds out about this and then sends the Nazgul to take it, and then that's Lord of the Rings.
But it's very interesting in that this thing focused like the narrative of the struggle of the War of the Ring focuses on the struggle of Aragorn versus Sauron. And then at the end, it's like, when all was lost, or when all was deemed to be lost, there was a great aid unlooked for because of the halfling Frodo.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how they kind of talked about the halflings too, about like there were like river people or something like that. Let me see if I can find it. And I often wonder, like this chapter, like I don't know if there's a lot of notes or if they just don't want it to be really long because it obviously talks about it in Lord of the Rings. But let's see. Yeah, and yeah, I don't like. Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna find this. I'm sorry, guys. Like, it's just, I'm gonna take too long. But you know what I'm talking about. They have some interesting ways of describing, like, they call them river folk. And if you remember the beginning of Lord of the Rings, the hobbits talk about how, like, you know, especially around, the Shire, they're not river people.
The river folk part in this bit is sort of the reference to Smeagol and Gollum.
Yeah.
With the hobbits, it has for as many songs have since sung, it was the Perenniath, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows, that brought them deliverance.
Yeah.
So here now they're dwellers in hillsides or hobbit holes and meadows, right? It wasn't just any old hole. It was a hole.
It was a hobbit hole. I love that so much. But yeah, it was what I meant to say is it's like if you've read Lord of the Rings and I'm reading this, you know that like hobbits aren't really water folk. And then they make, like, I think Pippin and Merry make some comments about the weird hobbits that go in boats and how like different and strange they
are. Frodo's parents died in a boat accident.
Oh yes, there was that too. Oh my goodness. And so yeah, it just goes on to, like, we kind of end with, okay, so Sauron sends the Nazguls to take the ring, and the events of Lord of the Rings start. And they also say this is the end of the Third Age. So I'm guessing the end of Lord of the Rings is the end of Third Age. Am I reading that right?
Yes. So after the ring is destroyed, it's not the ring's destruction though that marks the end of the Third Age. It's Aragorn's coronation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Aragorn's coronation in marriage to Arwen is what brings in the Fourth Age.
Yeah, and then a whole bunch of the elves leave too.
Yep.
Oh, that's sad. And then they also revealed that the Círdan had the red ring all along and had given it to Gandalf. And then it talk about Círdan being the shipwright. And I'm assuming Círdan and the rest of the sea elves there. My sea elves, gotta love my sea elves. Polari, yeah.
Take now this ring, he said, for thy labors and thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee and defend thee from weariness. For this is the ring of fire, and herewith, maybe, thou shalt rekindle hearts to the valor of old in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores, guarding the havens until the last ship sails. Then I shall await thee.
Yeah. And then we find out at the very last end that Círdan takes all the remaining elves back to Valinor after the War of the Ring. So, it's not all of the ones, right? Because some of them choose to stay. So
there are still elves that remain.
But they can't go back, right?
No, they still can. Because Legolas and Gimli end up sailing across to Valinor.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just saying, you know what? As soon as that the plane touched ground in California, I heard those seagulls. I was like, "Effing them out!" Like, we're going to Valinor, guys. Like, yeah, you're right, Border Prince. They can't go back. I'm sorry. I wanted to finish the sort of summary of the end of that so we could answer your question. So, sorry to sidetrack. What's your view on why Christopher Tolkien included that whole section about Atlantis in the history of Middle Earth books? So you guys can answer that because I haven't read that yet. So.
Oh, let me see the question. Okay, hold on. Sorry to sidetrack. What's your view on Christopher? Whole section about Atlantis and the history of Middle Earth books. If I recall correctly, that's when he was talking about Numenor, if I'm not mistaken. Gadfly, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because it's been a minute since I've touched history of Middle Earth. I have it right up here, but I believe it was There was a part. I think it was. Again, I could be 100% wrong on this, so if I am, correct me. But if I'm pretty sure that the Atlanta stuff was conceptually how he envisioned the fall of Numenor, where he was drawing inspiration to create create the destruction of Numenor, I guess would be the best way to put it. I could have that wrong though. It's been a while since I've actually read History of Middle Earth.
The world of Middle Earth is full of cognizant parallels to European legendaries and lores and all that sort of stuff. So so there's, like we were saying about the Rohirrim essentially being Anglo-Saxons, but horse-based Anglo-Saxons. The idea of the Numenorians being this relic of an ancient race of hyper advanced Ubermensch type of thing. That's a direct like you can create the direct parallel to the Atlantis mythologies between them, right?
So he says he includes this person's dream from a random dude at Oxford Society talking about Atlantis and how he dreamed up the language. Hey, dude, I'm not gonna question the guy, but that is cool. I think the history or like legends and stuff of Atlantis are really, really interesting when you start getting into them, and I could definitely see it in Numenor. And I think Numenor sort of has the same mythological structure of like what happened to Atlantis, where like it was said that the people got like way too prideful and they started messing with sort of the order of nature, and that is why they were destroyed. If I remember that correctly, I think I do. And
well, depending on which myth
the source
of Atlantis you're using, but yeah, the idea of supplanting the gods, or in this case, supplanting the Valar and putting oneself as a deific entity. I'm
going to read it, definitely. That's definitely on my like list of things to read. So oh yeah, and then someone was calling us out on our pronunciation. I think it's unknown sage. You're right, unknown sage. It should be a hard C for Círdan. I keep saying that because I knew like people from the UK, and I don't even think that's how it should be pronounced in Gaelic, but the name Syrian, and that's just how they pronounced it. So it's kind of spelled the same. So I just keep reading it like that. So I'm sorry.
Well, there are a lot of C's in here that are soft C's.
Well, it's like a lot of people say Maedhros when they're talking about Feanor's eldest son, but it's actually Maethros. The DH is actually a TH. That's how it's pronounced.
I just hate that. I hate fighting. I should have read that.
I pronounced it that same way for the longest time, and then I had a friend of mine in my Discord who was like, "Hey, let me show you something here real quick," and he showed me like the actual like linguistics of it, and I was like, "Oh wow, okay, cool. I've been mispronouncing it for the past 20 years."
So. That's really cool. I did not know you have a Discord. I have to like send me like. I think I need to interact with something so I can learn some more of this stuff.
I'll send you a link, definitely. I'll post a link for everybody in our little group chat.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
Silmarillion book is legit great for learning pronunciation. Yes, it is.
Yeah, and do I think someone can create their own Middle Earth franchise without copying him? Well, if they're not doing Middle Earth like specifically, but if you could do your own like if you're in the Tolkien world, I mean, you're gonna have to like copy stuff and create it. If you're not, like, you definitely can without being a Tolkien copy. Like, I like Wheel of Time a lot, and it's kind of interesting to see how they sort of like there's ages in that series too, and they seem to be sort of defined a little bit like the Tolkien stuff, and the idea that power waxes and wanes. And I think that's probably the best thing I've read that comes close to having that kind of big book and stuff like that. But I think you could. I think the problem when authors mess it up is if they try to be too much like Tolkien and try to do things that they really just don't know about. Like, so if they try to do like the languages or something like that, or go into like the insane world building, I think that's what they screwed up.
It's forgetting the stuff that makes Tolkien as powerful as it is, and to go all esoteric. It's the good fiction writer is the writer who captures the inherent truths of humanity and human existence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what Tolkien does. And there are way too many writers out there who don't have that sort of goal or purpose within their stories, and people can like them, but I don't think that they will last, right? Like I go on this point a lot, but there are reasons why the Iliad, the Odyssey, Beowulf, Journey to the West, Don Quixote, Mort d'Arthur, Jane Austen, Lord of the Rings have survived as long as they have. Like in a millennia, these books, these stories will still be around.
Oh, I have a fell beast coming through. Oh, hopefully he'll sit on my lap. But this is a great point. And Border Prince says, I don't know which Zach's, because Zach said he has the full like audiobook on CD, and he said, but Border Prince said that the Martin Shaw one is great as he is from the Midlands like Tolkien, so he has the same enunciation and rhythm to his speech. Mercy and power. That is awesome. I definitely love like finding the recordings of Tolkien and the way that he talks and stuff. It's fascinating to listen to him speak. And I think if you were a good actor, you could probably really figure it out for yourself instead of going with the crazy rolled R's in something that we're not talking about because it's awful.
My answer to the previous question would be, if you were to create a story, you could create an original story set within Arda or Middle Earth or anything like that, so long as you abide by the rules of the secondary world. If you abide by the rules, if you abide by the rules that Tolkien set up for his world, you're not necessarily copying, you're just abiding by those rules.
Yeah.
You can create whatever original story set in that world that you want, so long as it abides by the rules of the world and also does not contradict things that are already established within the mythos. So, like the show that shall not be named, which completely bastardizes everything. You know, if you you could set a show in the middle of the Second Age during the height of the Númenóreans and have it be a completely original
that would
story.
be so cool. That's what I was like when I think I read just the summary of the Númenor story, and I'm like, why wasn't that Rings of Power?
But you can do that, and you can have your original characters and everything else, so long as it abides by the rules of the world that have been previously established, and so long as it doesn't interrupt or contradict already established events.
Absolutely, and I would add to that, as long as it respects sort of the themes that are established too, that's really important. And I wanted to read this comment because I think it's great. Velasquez Jeff said, most writers don't have Tolkien's ethic and wisdom. Writing takes more than being creative. It needs writing things that are true, that can transcend the mythologies. Yeah, exactly. Which is like Gadfly said about like the staying power of things like Beowulf and the Iliad and stuff. I would also add a really great book comes from an author that has a lot of really deep life experience. Like Robert Jordan and J.R.R. Tolkien both had experiences of war. Yes. So they were really able to draw that into the way that they wrote. And I think that their personal experience made the story so much better versus like you could read Brandon Sanderson, and no offense to him, but you can tell that he just doesn't have the depth of experience to have like a very like deep and moving thing. Like, I don't know if you've ever read any of his stuff. Yeah, like Will says, you just need to find a master of linguistics, theology, history, military tactics, while also having lived the life of a fighting man and having classically educated in a rigorous society. Absolutely.
Well, I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of aspects of relatability. When it comes to the life experience factor, it's one of the reasons that I find the writing in Hollywood to be so vapid and just empty, is because a lot of people in Hollywood they're in this bubble. Very little struggles, very, very, very pampered lifestyle. In contrast, that I think that John Everyman living in middle America or, rural UK, in the case of Tolkien or whomever, understands, you don't necessarily have to be seeing war or anything like that, but you understand the struggles of everyday life. And so you can write something that's more relatable to the average human being, which goes to the point that Gadfly was making as to why some of these stories have stood the test of time. There is also an aspect of relatability that the common man can, see themselves in the story.
One of the things that I notice happens with successful authors who, as they go on in their career, they lose touch with that aspect. Like I think Stephen King is a great example. Like he's respected and revered as an author, but his quality of work and the depth of the experience that a person can get from it has dropped off significantly.
It is drastically declined. You are 100% right.
Yeah. So, like a person needs to have that to maintain that humility of spirit as well. If they're going to have a prolonged career as a writer.
Right.
Yeah. So looking back at the Silmarillion, like, first of all, I should ask, is anyone else in chat? Chat, thank you so much. We have 20 people watching, and this is insane. It's Sunday, afternoon, no one's doing anything. Thank you guys so much. And if you guys haven't, hit the like button and shared and all that stuff, you know what to do. But thank you guys so much. I just wanted to ask if anyone have any comments or questions in chat. Here we have. It's honest. It's not just Hollywood that can't write. Some of the worst stories I've seen were independent films or comics because they can't write stories or action. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I love the independent renaissance, but it also means that greater volume. It's more. Yeah. You're gonna get a mixed bag. Trust me. I used to. I used to intern at an indie studio, and I've read some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest issues of modern writing right now is the over obeisance to the rule of cool, right?
Yeah.
My goodness.
I want this cool scene with cool dialogue without having any build up to it or appropriate build up to it.
Right.
Or making the scene make sense in the context of
there's definitely that. There's a lot of cool stuff in Tolkien, but oh my gosh, there's so much thought that goes into it. Goodness.
Oh yeah. It's kind of insane. Well, and that's
there's also, I'd also say that conversely, there's a great thing in Tolkien that you can learn is that you can have cool stuff in there without giving some huge in-depth explanations. So I think that's there's a Tolkien side where he gives you insane histories and stuff like that. And then there's Tolkien that's he made the rings and they were magic and that's it.
Well, the origin of the orc, I always like to use that as an example. It's left vague enough to where it's okay, we have X, Y, and Z as explanations, right? So you have, they might be elves, they could be this, they could be that, but it's left very, very vague, like you were saying. And then you'll have Tolkien spend 20 minutes describing a tree. It's just it's okay, cool.
Zach said, it would help if they knew what was actually cool. I totally agree.
That's true.
I don't want to get too much on tangents but yeah, there is Hollywood just doesn't want to admit they don't want to hire talented people. Yeah, that is definitely a problem in Hollywood. And just from working in there is this there's a nepotism cult, and it's nobody, I would say the people who are genuinely hired for their talent is maybe 20% of people working there. It's who and what your family connections are, because that's a really big thing too, and what what you're willing to make for people. And
it's also not, it's not just hired for their talent. It's like, okay, we've hired you for your talent, but you're going to only do things the way that we the studio tell you to do them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I learned after, like, I stopped watching Marvel films like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I learned was that the directors they bring on don't actually direct like the action scenes. They have like algorithmic action scenes and action sequences, and it's like, no wonder they're soulless and bland. And nobody, like, the directors don't even have the opportunity to use the camera well. Mm-hmm. And so the writing has to be worked around this shoehorned, forced confrontation scenes that are cool, but they're all cool in exactly the same way. All the superheroes land to do the stupid superhero pose.
Yeah, it's very formulaic. It's like stock character kind of stuff. Oh, we had a question from Border Prince, and he said, just an implication that Prince Imrahil has elvish blood in the story of his ancestors, because Silmarillion explicitly says Aragorn's and Arwen's bloodlines are the only mixed ones. And where's the second part of that? I asked because if he was, it would mean more elf-human matches occurred, but only the royal bloodline is important. I don't know the answer to that.
Let me find it here. Well, okay, so yeah, it's just an implication. Prince Imrahil has elvish blood, and the stories of his ancestors, because Silmaril's Aragorn's bloodlines are the only mixed ones. I'm
not really sure. I would assume that there would probably be like random people. I'm like half elvish, but they wouldn't be that common.
Well, I don't think it's implied. I'm pretty sure it's said directly that Imrahil is of elvish descent. Let me grab my copy of the
Wait, who was Imrahil? Like, was it the guy at the end of Lord of the Rings?
He was the Prince of Dol Amroth. He was the one of the he and his forces came to reinforce the garrison at Minas Tirith before the siege of
I remember that. Yeah, the prince that's not in the movies, but he's really cool. I liked him too.
So the thing to remember is there were the two half elves, or the two couplings of elf and man, and they both got the choice to choose which destiny they would have, right? Mm-hmm. So the one coupling produced Elrond and Elros, and Elros chose to have the human fate. Elrond took the elven fate. So every single one of Elros's descendants have elven blood, and that goes through the Númenórean race, right? Mm-hmm. With the line of the kings being sort of the most direct lineage to Elros. But that means every subsequent generation, there's more and more who have a portion of elven blood in them, right?
Yeah.
And then you consider that that Aragorn was, what was it, the 97th heir of Isildur?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's 97 generations of potential bloodlines, right? So
yeah. You are being quite filled, George. George is biting me. Sorry. That is true. It's interesting to see how it goes, because a lot of the Númenóreans would have had the elf blood, and then they also had the kind of extra powers thing, but they're not elven.
Well, because it's Pippin specifically notes Denethor's nobleness of bearing, and Frodo and Sam specifically notice Faramir's nobleness of bearing.
Yeah.
And they both are reminded of Aragorn, but to a lesser degree, right? In sort of nobleness. So that to me is the thing that kind of explains it, because Imrahil would then be of the same sort of lineage of the sort of steward level of the Númenórean descendants.
Yeah, that is true. But there's a part of me that's like, you know what? Maybe there's some just really awesome men, and they're just awesome men. They don't need to be like part elf to be awesome.
Well, that's where you get the Rohirrim.
Yeah, true.
Like Éomer is
Éomer and
favorite characters in Lord of the Rings.
He's cool.
Because he's just a guy who does what's right, regardless of the consequences to himself.
Yeah, that is so good. So we're wrapping up, and if I do not feed the fell beast, he is going to take down the entire backdrop because it keeps moving. Because the cat. But anyway, I wanted to thank everyone that has come out to watch us do these book clubs. I would like to thank all of my panelists, Feanor, Gadfly, and Nathan. I hope you feel better, Nathan. And I have had such an insanely great time doing this, and I've met a lot of cool people. I've learned a lot of cool stuff about Tolkien, and I feel so much more enriched from having read these books and being able to talk to them with that. And I just wanted to thank you all. This has been a wonderful time, and I think I'm going to keep doing the book club stuff. The next one I think I'm going to do is a book called Warrior of the Alatai. It's by Robert Jordan, and it's a very short and compared to all of the stuff we've been reading, a book that reads really fast. It's sort of like barbarian pulpy fiction, and I think I'm going to talk about that. If anyone's interested, let me know. Cool. But does anyone else have any closing thoughts on this?
Summarizing the Silmarillion, eh?
That's where to begin. No, it's
the rest of the Legendarium. I don't know. I feel like I need some brain break for this.
Right. Well, we'll do all 12 volumes of the history of Middle Earth next. Yeah. No, it's always fantastic to deep dive into Tolkien's world, and in a lot of ways, I find the Silmarillion more enjoyable than the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, just because of how in depth and like it's more fleshy. There's more meat to it in terms of like the world building and understanding the realm of Arda that Tolkien is creating for you. No, it's fantastic stuff.
It amplifies everything in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
So the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings on their own are absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you add having read the Silmarillion under to it, like it just opens up so much more about how fantastic these stories actually are, and the depth and the meaning and importance of the narratives within them, the lessons of evil always being the perpetrator of its own demise, the lessons of the courage to stand up against the evil, and the lessons of what to look for in yourself that is leading you astray.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all just lessons worth learning, and always worth a reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what really drew me to this. I thought it was so good for that. The themes that there was like there's evil in the world, and we need to fight against it. And yeah, it's so great. So thank you guys again. Do you guys have anything upcoming that you'd like to plug?
Well, I am going to be on a stream on the 2nd of February with one Miss Martin Muses. I'm going to be on the pub crawl, doing that with her, just talking Tolkien and what have you. And that's pretty much all I have slated immediately. I'm waiting to get my new PC so I can start video editing again, and then doing some streaming and whatnot. And every once in a while, you'll see me go live, and I'll be streaming a game here and there. Prior to that, I might actually even stream later on tonight.
Ooh, awesome!
We'll see, but we'll see. I got a bunch of stuff I got to get done today, so
yeah, I feel that. And Gadfly, do you have anything coming up?
I've got a lot of projects that have been put on hold because of my battle with the Academy, but just watch the space. There are things coming up. I don't know which order I'm going to put them out in, but I need to defeat the Academy first.
Yeah, we definitely need to help you with that, or we need to find you like a better place to be, because I don't think that you deserve butter, and they don't deserve you.
I definitely deserve butter.
Butter, yes.
Butter. Yeah, everyone butter. So again, thank everyone out. Let me get this up so I can play us out, and I am just going to put us everyone away. Thank you all for watching again, and we'll see you next time. And I'll probably put up on like the YouTube announcements and Twitter and stuff what we're going to read next, so everyone can get find it and stuff. So thanks again, and I'll see you later. Oh yeah, wait, I will also be on Zach's always on Wednesday night too. I always forget that, like, it's just a given, but I really appreciate the stuff we do with Zach's, and he's awesome. He has a great show, and thanks again, and I will see you guys later.